Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Some exciting stuff we're going to talk about today in the world of sports. We intend to talk about architecture, but it pivots over to sports because this guy is a noted architect in the New York metro area, has been for decades, but he also was a tennis pro back in the day. I'm talking back in the 80s and the 90s, and just some of the stories out of the sports world that he shared with us so far. Just amazing. Some of the biggest names in tennis he's played with, played against, and he is John Riggio, and he's back with us. Hey, John, how you doing?
Good. Hi, Steve. How are you?
It's good to have you here. So when we last left off, a lot of stuff we were talking about, records was one of them. Tennis records that you made or you held. Highest percentage of winning. I'm trying to remember what that one record was.
Tiebreaker wins.
Tiebreaker wins. Wow. Okay. Tell me about that.
This is when you go to play a set of tennis and the score is even. And you go to play there and they say it's 6-6. So what happens is you have to play a tiebreaker match. So whenever I played a tiebreaker match, I usually would really play with my best serve for that match. And I would usually win the match. I had the highest percentage. I think the percentage was approximately like 100%. So whenever I would play the game to play with a tiebreaker, my opponent would always, they would start to say, oh, it's over now. They know it's over because when we got to a tiebreaker, my percentage was so high on winning the tiebreaker that the chances of winning is diminished all of a sudden. So this is another record that I held, was the percentage of tiebreaker wins.
So, like, two ways to look at that. If you're the opponent, let's say I'm playing against you and we're tied, and I know that you have that high percentage of winning the match, psychologically, I think your opponent is at a disadvantage because I know that this guy is probably going to beat me. But on the flip side of that, when you're faced with a tiebreaker, do you feel more stress? Does stress come to you at that moment, or it's just like, yeah, no problem, I got this? You know, do you feel anything different at that time?
Well, I think as far as playing and being very competitive as a player, that when it comes to the tiebreaker match, and I had the ability to really to play excellent, I just would really just concentrate more to try to win that tiebreaker game. And what I would usually do is I'd usually try to give them my best serve, a very accurate serve. It was a fast serve. And so if my opponent was standing to the left, I would probably just serve down the middle. If my opponent went to the right, I would just serve to the left side. And that is usually how I would play, serving the ball. And I think on some of these type of games that I really concentrate on my serve, I was able to even maybe ace them 4 times in a row. I would win the game. So that is how I was able to have that high percentage of winning tiebreakers. I really used my serve to really concentrate on the game. And if they were able to hit the ball back, a lot of times I was able to just come up to the net and just really just hit the ball at the net to wherever they weren't standing, and I could win the point. So that is how I was able to win those tiebreaker games.
So I have another thought here based on what you just said, John. Do you have what you would call like your secret serve? You know, secret shots that, you know, you hold back until you really need to fire them off? Or is it more of you just got to see where the other player's positioned and then you make your decision on how to fire that shot?
Yeah, what I used to do is I wasn't always really hitting the serve as hard as I can on in every game. Usually the first game I played, and like on a tiebreaker, I would really try to hit the serve as hard as possible and accurate as possible to really try to ace them. In the games in between, a lot of times I wouldn't necessarily hit the serve as hard as possible. I had a number of different kinds of serves. I had a slice serve, I had a top spin serve, I had a straight serve that wasn't the one that I would really try to ace them on. So I had a number of serves I can play, and so in each game I wasn't really just trying to ace them in each game, and that's usually has to do with playing over the years, and even playing in my initial club that I had, that the players could even start to complain that I'm just acing the ball on them every time, and that they can get frustrated about it. So to play the game, and I didn't really just try to hit the ball for an ace on every serve throughout the whole match. That's so on the tiebreaker match, I really tried to ace each serve, and that was really resulting in me winning the tiebreakers, and that's how I was able to win they get the highest percentage in the ATP record.
Before we go into other details about your career, this is a tennis question. I play occasionally, so I just wonder, when you really put a lot of power into that serve, like in this situation, tiebreaker, I am going to blast that ball over there. Do you increase the chances of the ball not going where you wanted it to, or it maybe going out of bounds when you put that power into it? I mean, really, really kick that ball over there.
Yeah, I think hitting the ball very hard I was never muscling the ball over. I think that's one thing about tennis I explained, is that usually when I would hit the ball, I would usually really swing the racket very swiftly.
Okay.
And that really made I was able to hit the ball very fast. If I was to try to muscle the ball would probably go slower. And then there's also one factor: if you really try to muscle the ball and you really hit the ball too hard, what happens is the ball, it contorts and then it would go off the court. And that's one factor. So even though I would swing the racket very swiftly, I wasn't muscling it too hard where I would have the ball would bend and then go off the court. That happens. I think that happens a lot of times when people are older, after maybe exercise weights too much, and you don't want to bend the ball. That is one problem. So you really, even though I hit the ball very swiftly and fast, I couldn't really muscle it too hard, because if I muscled too hard, then the results of the serve is going to go awry, where it's going to go off the court, and so that comes from years of experience of just hitting the ball very quickly, but not too hard, not really hitting into the ball too hard. So that's one factor about, even though the ball was going fast, it had to do with really swinging the racket swiftly and hitting the ball right at the sweet spot of the racket, and it going very swiftly and fast across the court. That's how the ball was going fast. And I think it's also like when you hit the ball straight on, a straight serve, or they might even call like a hammer serve, is when you're hitting the ball straight on to try to really get the most accurate and quick serve. If you were to hit the ball different varieties of that same kind of serve, the ball, you wouldn't really be hitting it where it is really going as fast. You're still trying to hit it accurately, but it's slightly going slightly slower, and that's more like putting the ball in play. You're putting the ball in play. Although the ball is going very fast, you're still putting the ball in play compared to really trying to ace your opponents.
I remember you saying a while back that when you serve, many times you wore knee pads because you hit yourself with the racket. Was that in the beginning of your career?
That was sort of at the time when I was playing the national tournament. I started to encounter this problem of serving the ball and my racket coming down and hitting me right on the kneecap. And it really hurt my kneecap. I thought my kneecap was cracked. I went to my doctor, and I think the answer to that was just to put a shield over my knee. And that gave me some time to figure out how to make it where my racket wasn't going to come down and hit me right on the knee. And I was able to slowly improve my serve from there. and made it where when I served the ball, it didn't hit me in the knee. So that I was able to improve that, and was able to remove the shield off my knee.
Wow. Uh, as a player, that's got to be a bit of a challenge because you want to give the most impact to the ball, but you don't want to hurt your knee. So, um, I mean, I guess a delicate balance where you had to find that sweet spot where you weren't hitting your knee anymore. I guess you had the backup plan of having the knee pad. Let's talk about the sponsors. Lots of things had happened with those sponsoring the your tour, and Mitsubishi was one of them, right?
Yes. Now I discussed the Japanese sponsors, but I didn't really name them. I remember their name, and they are part of the Mitsubishi Corporation. That's who they are. And then the unfortunate things that happened with that one employee of their corporation that was working in the sport business. He eventually was arrested, and I was told by the other Japanese sponsor that continued contact with me that after he was arrested, they put him on trial and he committed suicide. I mean, that is really what happened to him. And then with that penalty that Japan received of the $400 million, it turned out to be the largest penalty in sports history. So that's another record that happened. That is the largest, and it also involved with them getting penalized where they're not allowed to involve themselves with international sports for a certain number of years. So there was a number of penalties involved with that. It was very serious and involved one or more arrests on their side too. And of course, Japan was sorry about the whole thing. And the Mitsubishi company promised to try to stay with me, figure out how they can continue playing. And I think from working with them, I eventually devised this trip to Hawaii that worked pretty good. And that is where that left off.
Wow. How did that happen with Mitsubishi getting that fine? Kind of reset that for us. I know that we talked about that in the past, but how did that all come about?
This was a number of things that happened. And since they weren't able to really connect with the ATP to have them play, and I think one of the reasons was I thought that maybe they needed people higher in their organization. The people that I was usually working with were people very high, people, Ross Perot, the Vanderbilts, had a lot of people, Robert Kraft, things like that. These were people very high in organizations. I think they needed someone higher in the organization to really make it happen with the ATP, because
Wow.
I called some people, the coaches at the tennis center, things like that, and they were suggesting some idea. Maybe that was what one of the problems, that the sponsors that they had working on the job were too low to really get this going. Maybe they didn't have enough knowledge. I don't know what the problem is, but so that's what happened. And so when they reviewed my case, there was a few things. One of them was trying to push ahead too many games in a short time was also another violation they committed. Having me play like 7 matches in one day wasn't correct. They had to stretch it over like maybe a year or 2 years, that number of matches. So that was another factor involved, that they were doing wrong things from the beginning. And they couldn't put me in play with the ATP very well. They had some of those forfeited matches, and then so that is the problem. And because of that, it resulted in a serious fine. I think each one of my sponsors was able to put me in play. Unfortunately, they were not able to put me in play right away. They encountered too many problems, and that is what happened. So then that is really why they issued that fee, and I think it was 400 million. I remember, I think with additional fees and things, it might have even come out to $450 million, but it was reduced from the total fee that started off at 500 million, and that is because I had already played them in that short time, but I played a lot of matches, and advertising, things like that were taking place in the Pacific, and so it was reduced slightly to 400 million.
Wow. I can't. And again, these are numbers back then. So, if we talk now, a sports sponsorship fine of $450 million, your head's still gonna spin around. This is then. We're talking, right, 80s, early 90s, somewhere around there.
Yes, yes, it was. So that came after 1992. That came
Gotcha.
after 1992.
So I mean, to equate it into today's market, that's you're probably looking at like $600 million. If you would equate it somehow, I don't know, what that would actually
Yes,
be, but that was a huge fine. That and you had nothing to do with it.
I think at that time you might have heard it in the news when they were talking about international sports and they're talking about Japan. That Japan was really penalized really bad. That they weren't allowed to really invest internationally for a true number of years.
Wow. Do you think that because you were connected to that fine, again, it wasn't on you, it was Mitsubishi having the issue. Do you think that that had an impact on your tennis career because you were connected to it at all?
No, I don't think the fine really did affect it. I think it just had to do with just very simple. Their sponsors, their coaches, administrators did not have the ability to really put me in play. They even had very simple problems like the visa getting over there to Japan, and so there was very strange problems going on there, and so it took me some time to really figure out how to solve the problems, and that is what had happened.
Wow. I just can't imagine that amount of money. And I'm fine, but they
I
are.
think there might have been a problem, which was really sad. I was thinking about. I think the people, the sponsors, the coaches, administrators that I was talking to on the phone, might have been too low to really believe that the corporation of Mitsubishi at the top was really buying my contract, and they really wanted me to. They really buy my contract and really wanted me to um achieve, to continue winning in tennis. I think maybe there was a communication gap between the
Mm,
top uh, owners of the corporation and whoever the coaches and administrators that were much lower were really trying to do this, and they really weren't getting things done. I think so. That is, I think,
mm.
what the truth might have been happening. I was even told on the phone by the people in Japan that they were going to raise the taxes in the whole country to pay this fine instead of just
Whoa.
having someone solve the problem and play. It's very strange. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think that is what the problem was, that maybe the coaches and the administrators there were too
Mm,
low. Maybe they were also. I remember I was telling the story about how one of their coaches was getting very frustrated, and instead of figuring how to play better, they were just gonna cheat. They were gonna lie about it. Say I was disqualified, things like that, and that really wasn't the answer to really having me play. I think so. What was happening at the bottom there with the coach that they were going to just lie about playing wasn't obviously the goal of the corporation that would buy me and then pay a large fine would that
mm.
obviously would not make any sense. So I think that was the number one problem. Now I think they myself there was no one for me to call in Japan that I can call someone higher than them and tell them that they're doing a bad job. It ended up coming out to them getting really sued in the international court, and at least two of their players got arrested. One coach, one player, I think, as a result of that, and they got a very large fine. But I think
Mm.
the easiest way to solve the problem might have been to have their corporation, the people at the top of their corporation that are higher up, very possibly could have solved the problem. There was one idea, maybe they could have even sold my contract to someone else, since they couldn't really solve the problem here in the US of having me play. Maybe they could have put my contract up for sale and
Mm.
sold it to another sport organization that would be interested to continue the playing. And so I think, given the numbers that when I was playing, there was a lot of winnings going on. I think at the time with the Ross Bro, there was a lot of winnings going on as far as my playing. The matches I was playing were resulting in millions of dollars of profit, and I think it's very easily they could have even at that time sold me off. But I think the people I was working with in Japan were too low to sell my contract. They weren't the people who could sell my contract. They're really just like tennis administrators, tennis coaches in their sport office.
Hmm.
And so they did not know how to solve their problems. I think they gave me some open invitations, I think over the years, even after 1996, for me to go to Japan and show up at the Mitsubishi office and just ring the doorbell and see if I can still continue doing things with them. So they left open invitations, which is very nice. But I think I think there are probably some other smarter ways maybe to continue the career, sell off my contract, things like that. There was obviously like a communications gap, and then the one guy that was really having problems, he was the one who had a serious rant on the phone about my girlfriend's father and everything. He was the one who really seems to have had the biggest problem there.
Was that the girlfriend that you referred to? Was that Delilah?
Yes, that's Delilah.
Ah, okay. And she was connected, I think you mentioned, to Olympic figure skating celebrity Dorothy Hamill at one point, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, yes, I knew Delilah for a long time, and she was a ice skater, and she used to ice skate with Dorothy Hamill. She, in fact, knew Dorothy Hamill personally. She used to talk to her with the ice skating. She was in some of their shows in Manhattan, and as a background skater. But one thing is, since she was friends with Dorothy Hamill, Dorothy Hamill and Delilah, they came to watch one of my matches. I was playing a national tournament match. They both showed up and they watched me win one of the matches on a Saturday morning. So that was very good. And so she told them all about Delilah told them all about me and playing tennis and everything, and they thought it was really great. I think, and they
Wow.
that is what was happening. So there was all kinds of different things going on there.
Yeah, it's amazing when I think about Dorothy Hamill, uh, coming from her figure skating, but then turning it into, it was almost like a skating franchise. Was it Escapades on Ice? I think it was called.
Yes, yes. I yeah, I was just recently researching some of that, and I remember some things like Delilah was one of the Smurfs and the background skaters and things like that,
Wow.
and some of the other little background shows they had. And so that was interesting. One interesting thing was also they were both like the same height too. So Delilah looked very similar to Dorothy Hamill. They were same height, so looked similar, and so they were friends together. And,
Funny you talk about height and women. So I'm watching a tennis match the other day on TV, and I don't even know who the players were. I was at a restaurant. The game just happened to be up, and I just happened to glance at it and was almost blown away how tall this one female player was. I had to be like over 6 feet without even a thought. Probably like 6'4". Not kidding. She was doing great. I don't know the name. I don't even know how the match ended. I was just looking at it from a distance, but it took me by surprise. Like she's huge. Is that normal for women in tennis?
yes, I think for females, the height of the female player is usually tall. I'd say they usually like maybe anywhere between like 5'10" to maybe 6 foot or
Wow.
6'1" even. So that a lot of the female players are taller, and I think and that height also is taken for men and women is taken whether you have your sneakers on or your sneakers off, and that was always like a funny discussion they had about people's height. So for males, I think the optimum height was really 5 foot 11 inches tall, and this is another discussion that we were having at the
Hmm.
top pro group of how tall the players are. Usually the optimum height turns out to be like 5'11" on average, maybe a little taller, maybe a little shorter. And then that height is also is taken, like if you have your sneakers on or you don't have your sneakers on. So there's always something funny with that. And then the next thing was there was a trend for some players to really play at a height of 6'1" or taller, maybe 6'1", 6'2". But I noticed that is really just a small group of people. Most of the 5'11" players were coming from the USA, Europe, Australia, even the Pacific. Almost all the players, there's sort of like an average height of like 5'11". But there was a small idea of players being more like 6'1" or taller. And this was an idea that they were playing with for a while. I don't know whatever happened with this idea, if they really continued on to having players really have like 6'1", because everyone was usually the best players were all like 5'11". That's the form. And so this idea of having taller players, what they were talking about, I don't know if it was really going to go ahead for the male players. The female players, I think overall are taller females, usually the same height as the male players. I think a lot of them are about the same height as the male players. They aren't really like 6 inches shorter or anything like that. So the female players are tall females, and they're very strong. You know, to play tennis, you have to be a tall female, strong player to play the pro tennis, and that is usually what's happening with the height of the players. And then of course in tennis, I think some people, there's always this thing of like thinking if you say you're like 6'1", 6'2", they'd look at you better. They'd look at you better, thinking you are a better player. If you were to write down you're really 6'2", maybe like inch or two shorter in real terms. But that's another joke that was going on. If you showed yourself claiming you're really a much taller player, they'd like you better in the sports and things like that. So that was like an interesting trend that was taking place at the time. But I think overall the optimum play was really on average about 5'11". Maybe they might their actual height might be a little shorter, a little bit higher, but approximately a 5'11" player.
Wow. See, I never knew that. And I'd like to think I'm a pretty good tennis fan. So the things you learn. John, always great talking with you.
I think if you were to look at even the specifications of a lot of the other players that are people know about, if you look, you see most of them are approximately 5'11".
Wow. Okay. I want to tell everybody your website, because if you're looking for any kind of architectural services, this is the guy over here. He's done such great work residentially, commercially in the New York area. He can help you around the country with suggestions if you have them as well. And he's also got that tennis career going on back in the day. You can find all of that at John Riggio. That's John, RIGGIO.com. Fascinating stories as always, John. It's always a pleasure to have you with us, and looking forward next time we get a chance to talk. I thank you very much.
Great. Thanks a lot, Steve. Thank you.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.